my 15-year association with Frome, I've always felt that it's one of the most interesting of Britain's small towns, and with a wonderful history. And of course that history begins in the historical record with this building where we are tonight. In fact, it starts with the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle for the 23rd of November 955. It's the first contemporary record of this place. I want you to imagine it. Smaller church, although still a big church, a royal church. Long, high, narrow nave, high windows, stained glass, they had glass there. Artificial light, of course. Torchlight. Incense. Glowing with wall paintings all the way around. A rood screen, they had those, of course, in Anglo-Saxon England with great painted crucifixes in wood. Gilt crosses, all the paraphernalia of Old English Christianity. And imagine it that night, incense, Latin hymns being sung, whispered Anglo-Saxon, and the King of England brought in here perhaps to die. That's what usually happened. The Royal Hall was somewhere outside, we don't know where it was, but you'd come in here in this sacred place. To them, an old place even in 955. The king's brought in to be in the presence of the saints when he dies. And this is what the chronicler wrote that day, or that year, sorry, in Winchester. Here forferde Edred Koning on Sancta Clementus Mass Day on Frome. He went forth. King Edred Koning went forth. He died on St. Clement's Mass Day, 23rd of November. In Frome, still spelt the same way, in 955. The entry was written the same year. And the funeral procession, I suppose, would have started here as well. The rituals here, outside the church, and then the long funeral procession, taking him all the way back to Winchester where he was going to be buried. Relics of saints around the catafalque, and a long procession of dignitaries and churchmen on the road back. It was an important royal place. That's why the king was here. That's why he died here. An important royal place to them. In fact, the kings of Wessex, first kings of England, really liked this part of Somerset. They had special loyalty to it, I think. And Frome was already old to them. In fact, Edred's half-brother, who was the king of England, first king of England, Athelstan, held a great Christmas court here in 934 with hundreds of dignitaries, Viking earls, kings from the Celtic fringe. And again, you can imagine this place full then of very different kinds of rituals. The gift-giving of gold rings and jeweled swords, and the rituals of submission, where the kings of Wales and Scotland embraced the King of England and took him as father and lord, as they said in Anglo-Saxon. Father on the Llaford. And he in turn promised them to be their guardian by land and sea across through the islands of Britain. So wonderful scenes again in the original church that stood on this place. Scenes rooted deep in our history. And the reason for it all, as Robin mentioned, and as all Frome people know, of course, was St. Aldhelm. And the foundation around the year 685, we celebrated the 1300th anniversary here then, you remember, who founded a church on this spot back then. In a place probably already holy, one assumes. Perhaps it was the Holy Spring outside, the spring that still flows down Cheap Street. Perhaps that was the reason why the place was originally holy. And no doubt also a centre of population too. If you look in William the Conqueror's Doomsday Book for 1086, it gives you an idea of the kind of population of Frome. Less than 100 taxable people, maybe 500 altogether in this place. So, a royal estate, a kind of mini Sandringham for the Anglo-Saxon kings, and a very ancient and much revered church, revered even in those days back in 955, 934. So a very interesting place in the national story. But it's also a beautiful place, isn't it? And a very interesting building.